Financial Planning Stories. I'm Kevin Tharp, elder law and estate planning attorney.
And I'm Gary Anderson, financial advisor, Anderson Advisors.
Gary, we could do a lot of shows. We could probably do 20, 30 shows just on the stories that we've experienced over the years. Just, before we got here, we were sharing some stories about things that happened to people that we know. Many of them had a good ending, some of them not so good an ending. And in financial planning, there's a lot of stories. But one of the things I've learned in just hearing a lot of the stories that you've been involved in over the years is that there are some fundamental principles in these stories, throughout these stories, some fundamental themes. And sometimes when these fundamental principles are missing or people try to skip over this or ignore it, then often the story doesn't have a good ending.
Kevin, that's a good point. And one of the fundamentals is making sure that you plan and that you plan as early as possible. And I'm not talking about waiting till you're 65 or 70 to plan for a retirement plan financially. We have people that do it, and it works at times, but sometimes it greatly limits the things that you can do in retirement. And it reminds me of a situation that we've actually had more than once, but I had somebody come into my office several years ago who was still working, very vibrant, very vital person, had a good job, and both he and his spouse were in good physical shape, and he was in his early 50s. And he said, Gary, it's about time that they had come to a speaking engagement that we had. Gary, it's about time that we did this. We want to do these things you're talking about. We want to have this conversation because you never know what's going to happen. How many times have you ever heard you never know what's going to happen? And when you're in planning, that's a good principle too. You never know what's going to happen. You see it all the time. I see it all the time. And I think a lot of times we're very fortunate that we're able to see what happens in people's lives. I know it's changed my life over the years just listening to what people go through. I'm always amazed, Kevin, at how people can go through so many things, deaths, divorces, all types of things, disabilities, and still they come out and they're still smiling and still able to talk about it. It just really makes you feel grateful to even be a part of that. But this particular person, he wanted to start what he thought was early. He really thought they were a little bit late. He knew they probably should have at least put a plan in place financially and retirement-wise, just as their estate plan wasn't really in a good position at that point, to make sure that things were going to happen in retirement for them the way they wanted to happen. Namely, they wanted to maintain their lifestyle. They made good income. They didn't want to just all of a sudden have to live off Social Security. And so he said, Gary, I've got a 401k. My wife has a 401k. As a matter of fact, both of them had more than one. They'd worked for companies along the line and had kind of accumulated 401ks over time, even though they still were with the different companies. But he said, I want to make sure that these 401ks that I have, including the one that I have now, is going to be able to be put into a plan that's going to help us accomplish the things in retirement that we need. And his retirement age, basically he had set a goal at the time for anywhere between 66 and 70 years old. He said, we'll be good there. Both of us love what we do. We want to continue to do it. And so we want to do that. And I said, well, that's a good plan. That's a good idea to draw up a plan around. But let's make sure of another thing. Let's make sure that if you have to retire early, that there's going to be provisions there for that you're going to be able to maintain a lifestyle if you retire early or have to retire early. And that was the farthest thing from his mind then, because he felt good. They both felt good. Everything was really well with them. And sure enough, though, as a couple of years went by, he had a couple of accidents, just happened to be freak accidents, and that started the ball rolling to where he really couldn't function quite as well as he had before. Very unexpected, never really been sick to any extent in his life, but this started this ball rolling with him, and he started to realize, Kevin, that well, maybe I'm not going to be 70 years old and still doing this work that I'm doing. Can't do it. I just won't be able to. And so we had planned for them, though, financially to anticipate that. Now, would it have been the same retirement they had if they had retired at 65 or 70? Not quite. It wouldn't have been the same. But we had planned on income that could cut in when something like that happened, no doubt, to either spouse.
Financial planning stories, that's our topic today on Truth in Planning. I'm talking with my co-host, Gary Anderson. And Gary, I think that is something that a lot of people, I've heard the saying before, and I know it applies in financial planning as well as estate planning. There's oftentimes the life we plan, and then there's the life that actually happens. And many times people say, I want to retire. I want to work until I'm 70. But there's some unexpected event that we don't anticipate, but that doesn't mean that we can't prepare and plan for it and be ready for it if it does happen.
Yeah, that's what planning's all about. You're actually planning more for the unknown, Kevin, than you are the known. Because the unknown, that is life. That's what happens. You don't know really what's ahead of you. So, and you can't control all of that. I wish we could. But you can't control what happens to you down the line. We're sitting here on radio today. We don't know what's going to happen an hour from now or 2 days from now or whatever. But we have to plan knowing that these things could happen. Should we worry about it? Should we be anxious about it? Absolutely not. And that's what this couple was experiencing. They had gotten anxious about doing something, and there was something in them that told them that maybe things weren't going to work exactly like they thought they would, which that is life. And so what a plan does, when you actually put together a financial plan, a retirement plan, not just an account, we talk about that all the time. A 401k is an account. It's a plan for your employer. Put together a plan that takes that 401k and allows it to produce this income for you down the line at any point in time to make sure that plan is going to be in place to take care of things when they do happen. And this is something that people, once you do that, you're not so anxious about things anymore. You've got the plan in place. Sometimes I have people who call me and say, Gary, I just want to go over the plan. I want to do it again. Because they start thinking, because they hear things, radio, television, internet.
Friends.
Yeah, they hear all these things. And so they want to make sure that, okay, does my plan address this? Even though it probably does, they want to go over it again. So that's why we do something called reviews. And we have these reviews to reassure you that those things are in place. If things have come up and they aren't like they should be, we need to modify a plan to do that. You do the same thing in your work. Modify that plan to address a new situation. But we try to anticipate a lot of different things. And recently I had someone who had decided to retire just because they were having some disability issues, even though they're 63 years old right now. They've got some disabilities that they will keep them from working as long as they did. The income plan is in place, but they wanted to know, wait a minute, I want to check things before I go talk to Social Security and these people to make sure that it is as we said it was, that we talked about. And sure enough, it was all there in black and white. We were able to reassure this person that they were going to be able to retire when they needed to retire. And not necessarily if they needed to retire, but when they had to retire. And this is what we like to do for people.
And that review or setting up that plan, either one, can start with a single phone call.
That's right, Kevin. And this is something that we enjoy doing for people. It's a free consultation. Don't pass it up. 888-371-2847. Our website, gary-anderson.com. Kevin, it's important to do this. We don't charge for it because we think the information you get is way more important than anything that you can have, because it at least gives you the tools to go forward and do the things that you need to do or you want to do.
And you've got 2 office locations, do you not?
Yep, we're in Gainesville, 405 Broad Street, Southeast, and then we're also in Young Harris, 1352 Main Street, Suite 2, right there on the main road near Young Harris College.
You're listening to Truth in Planning on North Georgia's News Talk AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.